details. So if you abbreviate the way you present your college degree, then you need to abbreviate the way you present your law school degree. You know, all the dates should be in the same format. The fonts should be consistent. Any deviation from that is very irritating and distracting to lawyers, and they're not even going to focus on your credentials, they're focused on your formatting. And so you just want everything to be smooth and consistent. And proofread. Talk about this a lot. Read it carefully. You know, try not to leave these materials to the last minute when you're rushed and stressed. Do it in a very thoughtful manner. You can bring things in to us to get us to proofread, but don't rely on us to catch everything. I mean, you need to take that responsibility, maybe pair up with a friend, read each other's work. You can't rely on spell check to catch everything. So just really do a good job with proofreading. I mean, you heard earlier, one mistake can cost you the job. I mean, there's just no forgiveness for that, especially when they have so many applicants from so many students. So what we're going to do now is walk you through a real student's resume, because I often get questions from women else. Well, none of my, you know, I went straight through from college, I maybe had some retail jobs, but, you know, how do I put that on a resume, and what can I communicate to employers? So I'm going to show you what a student's resume looks like, and then you're going to pretend you're me and critique it, and I'll show you sort of how that resume evolves to give you a sense of what you might want to consider incorporating into your own document and how to present that information effectively for employers. So I'm going to show you something, and I guess these are my questions for you. What are your initial impressions of what you're seeing? Does this communicate relevant information for employers? So let's pretend this student is applying for, you know, a legal internship, maybe through the PIPS Day job fair, and this is what that employer gets. Can you see that? And I'll kind of move it so you can see it's kind of the top half of the document. Show you the bottom. Any initial, you know, if you were a legal services organization in San Francisco and you get this resume, what do you think? Is this somebody you'd want to interview, and why, or not, and why? Yeah.
I was going to say for the contact information for the supervisors, I don't think that's necessary on that page. You can add that to your reference list later on.
Right. So here she has contact information from her supervisors. You don't need any of that here. So let's go back to the top. Okay, so right there, here's the student. It has her listed as living in Arkansas. If you were an employer here, you think, that's sort of interesting. Why is this student from Arkansas applying for this job? Especially because there's nothing to show that she's a law student at Golden Gate. So often students are in such a hurry, you already have a resume, you start applying for jobs, make sure you update your application. Current address, current school. You list everything in reverse chronological order. So you list Golden Gate first, and then you go backwards in time. So if you have any graduate degrees, those will come next, then undergrad, and work backwards that way. So here, let's take a look at her college experience. There's a lot of stuff here. Now, it's great, she did theater. One might wonder, maybe she's going to be a litigator and she might be able to use that theater experience to her advantage. But there's an awful lot of it here. There's a lot of scholarships, which outside of that school, the names of the scholarships probably don't mean a whole lot. So this is where you want to start being a good editor. She might want to have a couple of those activities to represent that this is what I did or these are what my strengths were, but maybe not lots and lots and lots, especially if they're not adding value to the employer. So you want to always ask yourself, is this information helping? If it's not helping, is it crowding other things out that might have otherwise been helpful to the employer. As we talked a little bit, you mentioned in the work experience, I just want to point out a couple things. So you would not put your supervisor's name and number on here. I wouldn't put, duties. It just takes up more space. So just describe what the duties are. You don't have to say including but not limited to, because we know that including implies but not limited to. So you want to look for the most concise way of phrasing things. These sentences were not very exciting to me. The verbs that she used were kind of blah. They didn't really communicate skills to the employer. And I also noticed that the way they're presented, the page wasn't very balanced. You have all this information up here on the right side, and then kind of this weird space. I'm sorry, all this on the left and this weird space on the right. Any other feedback? Okay, so let's say the student came in and she got all that helpful advice. And so this is what we end up with. So at least now she's got her San Francisco address on it. We know she's a student here. She's presented her information. Now, obviously, you don't yet have your GPA, but it's important. You'll see, look at that GPA. Now, if you were her, you might be tempted to do 3.25. That's a reasonable temptation, but you can't. So you want to report it exactly the way the registrar reports it to you. So if it's 3 digits after the decimal, that's how you report it to employers. No shading, no rounding. You have to be very precise. If you make it to Dean's List, this is how you would present it. And any time you list Dean's List, you'd want to list the semester that you earned that achievement. If you've joined any student groups, you can certainly put that on your resume now. And you don't have to be the president. You could be a member. If you're going to their meetings and you're engaged with that organization, put it on the resume. That's a nice thing to communicate to employers, that you're involved, you've gotten here to law school, you're already engaging with the community. Sometimes your organization affiliations might communicate an interest. So if you're a member of the Environmental Law Society and you're seeking environmental law jobs, that's a way to signal to the employer that you have a shared interest. So here she still has all this college stuff. She can pare down some of the scholarships. Down at the bottom, where we list the employers, see the format is a little bit cleaner, a little bit more balanced left and right. Most folks tend to skim down the left side of the page, so that's really where you want to put your most important information. So that's typically the name of the organization where you worked and the job title that you held. Location and date is a little bit less important, so we tend to bump that over to the right side. And then having this white space in the middle here enables this information to pop out. So it's not nearly as crowded now as it was before. The job descriptions got cleaned up a little bit, so I tried to use a little bit more active verbs. I try to use a variety of verbs because each verb communicates a different skill that you have. So if you only say researched and wrote, researched and wrote, researched and wrote, it's boring, and it doesn't let the employer know all the things that you can do. So you want to try to use lots of different kinds of verbs. On the back of our resume handout, we actually have a list of some verbs that you can use to just kind of get your juices flowing and get some other ideas. But you want to try to use as many verbs as you can without making it torture. You don't want to use a thesaurus and come up with a word that you would never actually use if you were talking to somebody. It has to make sense for the context. So anyway, so that's her resume. So this is what she then went out, for 1L positions. I do want to show you what it will look like after, so maybe after you get that first internship and to start seeing this building process that happens. So now let's pretend it's, fall of her second year. And she's got her first internship, and so you start, they've changed the format because now you have more to add. So if you're an HLP, actually you could put that on now. If you get a law review, if you join more organizations, you start getting leadership roles, these are all relevant things to put on your resume. And you'll start to see the balance starts to shift, where the college stuff starts to minimize and the law school starts to increase in importance. As you accumulate more experience here, more honors, more activities, you want that to reflect on your resume. In terms of positions, students often wonder, what am I doing at that first job? So this where it says Tenderloin Housing Clinic, this was that HLP summer experience where you get paired up with a client. And so here's how she described it. And that's something you can put on your resume. And so you get a sense of what it is that students are doing at their jobs. They might be representing clients, doing some research, drafting documents. So this also gives you some clues about the kinds of skills you might want to highlight about your past work. The more you start researching employers, the more clues you'll get about what to embed in your resume and in your cover letter in terms of your skill set and your background. And if you want to really see what, fast forward, what it looks like, this is, actually I had to pare down some of her activities, but this is at graduation. Now you'll notice there's nothing about college here anymore. She has all these activities and achievements that happened here during her time at Golden Gate. So all of this is ahead for you. And then she had a variety of different internships. And so we recommend that you get between 3 and 5 of these positions, and each one builds on the next. It's not like you walk into law school and you have a resume of 6 internships. You get the first one, that leads you to the second one, that leads you to the next one. But we do want you to sort of see this as a building process. And so right now you're working on that foundation.
On the bottom, there's that special interest.
So special interests.
I mean, I don't know if any of it really relates to getting a law job.
Right. So special interests, there are a variety of opinions about whether or not to put interest on here. If you really have no experience, you're struggling to fill the page, you might put your special interests on if you have them and if they're special, because that helps fill the page. If your interests are special, if they are interesting, if they really do seem to engage other people in a conversation, it's fair game to put them on. Some employers really like them because they like to use it as an icebreaker in interviews. If you put it on here, you have to be prepared to talk about it, and talk about it in an interesting way. So a friend of mine who's an attorney interviewed somebody once for a position, and that student put, epic novels down here. So she said, oh, so I see you like to read epic novels. What was the last one you read? And it was like, blank stare. And so that's all my friend remembered about that interview, was that student's inability to talk about the thing that was supposedly that student's passion. So if it's on here, you need to be prepared to talk about it. You want to tend to avoid very controversial things, or sort of hot button stuff. You don't want to invite controversy at your interview. This is meant to be a way to create a connection, not to interfere. A couple other formatting things. If you are struggling to fill the page, you might consider using bullets. Bullets they're not very efficient. They tend to stretch your text this way, so if you don't have a lot to say, using bullets can be your friend. If you have a lot to say, you've had a lot of experience, you're struggling to get it on the page, then you might try to do a paragraph format, because it's just much more concise and more efficient with the space. You can try it both ways, see what looks better. You can play with your fonts. You're not required to use Times New Roman, and you can play around with fonts to see, what reflects you. There's little ways you can sneak in some personality, and that's one of the ways you can do it. Yeah.
As far as your position description, do you think limiting it to 2 or 3 sentences is sufficient, or how do you go about knowing how much to?
Yeah, so in terms of the description length, it really varies. And so, again, sometimes it's a function of how much are you trying to get on the page. How much is relevant to the organization you're writing to right now. Sometimes you end up sending a message without realizing it. So if you've held 4 or 5 positions, and one of them you use 6 lines of text, and the others you use 2 lines of text, it just puts a spotlight on the one with the 6 lines of text. Well, if that turned out to be the most menial of all the jobs, well, maybe that's not the strategic thing to do. Or if maybe that job isn't as relevant to the one you're applying to now, but another one is, you might amplify that other one and minimize so that kind of their eye is attracted to those things. So a lot of these, there are no hard and fast rules about a lot of this. A lot of it is strategy. How are you going to communicate a particular image or particular information to an employer? And you may even have multiple versions, kind of a wardrobe of resumes, so that if you're applying for district attorney positions and large corporate law firms,